Well, more now on Donald Trump calling Russia hacking reports ridiculous. The national security analyst Arash Aramesh joins me now from Houston, Texas. Always good to talk to you, Arash. Firstly, Mr. Trump, is he justified in negating these reports from the CIA?
You know, it puts all of us in a pretty tough and awkward situation when President-elect decides, A, not to get daily intelligence briefs, which he is offered and he's required to get by law, the same intelligence briefing the president gets. And B, it's also not very conducive to question the analysis of perhaps the most significant federal intelligence agency that we have. And those are sort of the same issues that a lot of us were worried about when Mr. Trump and now President-elect Trump decided to run. We were thinking about what would happen when a President Trump, for instance, would refuse to accept federal court orders, or what would happen if a President Trump would decide to undermine the FBI or undermine an investigation by his own Justice Department, or create some sort of a constitutional crisis, for instance, by saying, there is a federal court judgment, but I, as president, not going to enforce it. What's going to happen then? So this is just not very conducive or very, very productive. I think undermining the Central Intelligence Agency, which has many, many, many good civil servants who are non-political and who are non-partisan, this sort of rhetoric is just not very productive.
President-elect's tenure as president hasn't begun yet. It begins in January. But from the starting position, what will this mean for the relationship between President Trump and the CIA?
Well, we have to wait and see. I mean, we already know that President-elect Trump has decided to appoint Congressman Pompeo to become the next director of the Central Intelligence Agency. Mr. Pompeo has some experience with intelligence matters. Now, he's an outsider when it comes down to the agency itself, but he has experience sitting on the House Select Committee and Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. So that's good news. It's not as if he's appointing someone who has nothing to do with that line of work, like Ben Carson, for instance, who's a physician, and he's appointing him to be the Housing and Urban Development Secretary. But it does, when as president, when as the chief executive of the country, and when as the head of the executive branch, you start undermining the very people that are supposed to work for you, serve you, not only enhance and execute your policies and your agenda, but also make sure that U.S. national security and U.S. interests are protected. Again, that puts those people and senior level officials in a very, very awkward position. And having said all this, the right to vote, alongside the right to free speech and freedom of assembly and so on and so forth, are some of the most sacred, important rights guaranteed to Americans by the U.S. Constitution. To see that right undermined or jeopardized or in any way questioned or come under attack by a foreign power is something that all of us, Democrats, Republicans, independents, all Americans have to be worried about. And I welcome an investigation that would tell us, A, what happened, and B, what can we do to protect our vote and our destiny in the future, and not potentially and possibly become pawns in foreign powers' games.
President-elect Trump is expected to announce his Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson. What do we know about him?
You know, Rex Tillerson happens to be a Texan. He was born in Texas. He's 64 years old, if I believe. He's mandatory. He's supposed to retire mandatorily by ExxonMobil in about a year. So there's a 65-year mandatory retirement age. He's a lifelong Republican, a very successful oil and gas executive, but zero diplomatic experience. And a couple of red flags here. He has very close ties to Putin's Russia. He has been awarded the highest civilian medal that Russia can award someone. This is the equivalent of the American Presidential Medal of Freedom. He's been a pretty big advocate of American energy industry, especially American energy industry in Russia. And you know who's involved in the Russian energy industry. It's not exactly the most sort of liberal Democrats with small L and small d out there doing, that sort of business. He's been very much against sanctions against Russia after Russia invaded and occupied Ukraine and annexed part of Ukraine, such as Crimea. We have to see, but he has no diplomatic experience. He doesn't have diplomatic knowledge, and most likely a very hawkish character named John Bolton, the former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, will become his undersecretary. So number two, the role he is going to play is going to be very important. And that goes exactly against a lot of Mr. Trump's campaign promises. Appointing John Bolton as number two in the State Department is going against all of Mr. Trump's promises that he's not going to be an interventionist or get Americans involved in overseas or sort of Middle East battles, or putting America first before getting involved in foreign debacles. So we'll see how that works out. But so far, with one or two exceptions, I happen to dislike most of President-elect Trump's appointments to a future cabinet.
Okay, Arash, always good to talk to you. Many thanks indeed for your insight. Political analyst Arash Aramesh there talking to us.